So if everything is undergoing entropy, so that means all of your external muscles are going to go in entropy, all your internal muscles are going to go in entropy. So if you haven't trained something in a while, the assumption would be that whenever you stop training it, to this point, the tissue structure and everything, the strength, the ability of that tissue is going to continually go down. So therein lies the problem, is that from an external model, if you're using the exercises, bench press and all of the derivatives of bench press, you're really working in linear fashions. So what is often ignored in programming is, when was the last time you put effort into, say, your rotator cuff of your shoulder in order to either maintain the tissue that's there or to improve upon or to build upon the rotational tissue? And the answer is you don't. And for those of you watching, if you want to conceptualize this, you think to yourself, when was the last time you did any type of individual or isolated rotational training for your shoulder? And most people, their answer would be, the last time I got injured. So it seems like when you get injured, people start to realize that, oh, it's not just the superficial stuff that we're worried about, it's the deeper stuff. That brings us to another point, and I hate to bogart the conversation here, but if you look at the evolutionary development of articulations, of joints, what you'll always notice in all the joints except the spine is that you're going to run into the space, obviously, of the joint, which is confined by the capsule, as we all know. And then the next layer of tissue in every joint in your body is rotational tissue. So why is that important? That's important because obviously if the tissue is closer to the space, your nervous system really develops with an attempt to try to maintain that space, right? A joint is the ability for one bone to move relative to another bone. Ergo, it's the space between two bones. So that space is of utmost importance. The space is what later determines how tight or how loose muscles are kept. It's all dependent on the feedback coming from the space. So the problem is that you're doing all of this linear stuff and you're ignoring your rotational stuff. So what you're doing is you're preventing entropy from your external tissue, but you're incurring entropy in your internal tissue. And your internal tissue is what we refer to as our primary afferents, because the internal tissue is going to be what tells your central nervous system how that space is doing. Is it still good? Is it viable? Is there injury here or there? So if you're losing that internal tissue in time, you're really losing the ability for your body to read and understand that articulation, which means that you can't, if you ignore the internal system, you're, like you were saying, you're going to get to a certain point, right? If you bench press for long enough, you're going to get better, right? But then eventually you're going to hit a point where, because you've accommodated to that bench press and you've let everything else go, that bench press is going to start to come back down, or you're going to injure yourself.